Have you ever wondered how one of the wealthiest nations in the world spiraled into a decade-long economic slump? Today, we're about to grapple with that big question. We're delving into the abyss of the Great Depression, a catastrophic event that shook the world's economy to its core. It was a time of profound hardship, a time that tested the resilience of humanity on a global scale. So, fasten your seatbelts, history buffs, as we embark on this journey. Join us as we delve into the causes and consequences of the Great Depression. Before we plunge into the depths of the Depression, let's first visit the period that preceded it, the Roaring Twenties. This was an era marked by significant economic growth and widespread prosperity, particularly in the United States. It was a decade of jazz and jubilation, of flappers and fun. The nation's total wealth more than doubled between 1919 and 29, and this economic growth swept many Americans into an affluent but unfamiliar consumer society. People from coast to coast bought the same goods, listened to the same music, did the same dances, and even used the same slang. Many Americans were uncomfortable with this new, urban, sometimes racy, mass culture. In fact, for many, even most people, the 20s brought more conflict than celebration. However, a significant number of Americans were having a grand old time. Meanwhile, the American economy was a behemoth of growth. The rise of the automobile, electrical appliances, and other consumer goods led to an increase in buying on credit or installment plans, which allowed people to purchase goods over an extended period. The stock market, too, became a source of seemingly endless wealth. Yet beneath this veneer of prosperity, there were significant economic problems. The growth was not sustainable, and debt was piling up. The Wall Street was in a frenzy of speculation, and small investors were about to be caught in a crushing squeeze. But this period of prosperity was not meant to last. On October 29, 1929, the bubble burst, marking the onset of the Great Depression. This day, infamously known as Black Tuesday, saw the stock market plummet, triggering a wave of panic that swept across the nation. The stock market crash of 1929 wasn't an overnight affair. It was a culmination of weeks of steep declines. Investors had been speculating wildly, borrowing heavily to buy more stock, believing the market's upward trajectory was never-ending. But like all bubbles, it was destined to pop eventually. As stock prices tumbled, investors began to panic sell, further driving down prices. The market, once a symbol of prosperity and wealth, transformed into a vortex, sucking in the fortunes of many. In the aftermath of the crash, the economy took a direct hit. Businesses, unable to raise capital, were forced to close down or cut back, leading to massive unemployment. Consumer spending and investment dropped dramatically, sending the economy into a downward spiral. And then came the banks. Banks had been as speculative as everyone else during the Roaring Twenties, investing heavily in the stock market. When the market collapsed, so did they. Depositors, in fear of losing their savings, rushed to withdraw their money, causing a nationwide run on banks. This domino effect led to a banking crisis. Banks didn't have enough cash on hand to cover all the withdrawals. Many of them failed, leading to even more panic and deepening the economic crisis. The entire financial system seemed to be on the brink of collapse. In the wake of the crash, the nation was plunged into uncertainty and despair. The once vibrant economy was now crippled, leaving millions in dire straits. The optimism of the Roaring Twenties had given way to the harsh reality of the Great Depression. The Great Depression had officially begun, and its effects were far-reaching. In the coming years, it would touch every corner of the country, shaping the lives of a generation and leaving an indelible mark on the nation's history. Unemployment soared, banks failed, and the once prosperous nation was now grappling with poverty. Such was the state of life during the Great Depression. It was a time of profound struggle, where the average American was thrust into an economic abyss, a seemingly endless cycle of hardship and despair. Unemployment was a prominent and persistent problem. Millions of men and women were out of work with no means to support their families. The once bustling factories and businesses were now quiet, their assembly lines silenced by the cruel hand of the Depression. The jobless rate reached a staggering 25% at its peak, a number that represented not just statistics, but lives turned upside down. Poverty was not just a word, but a harsh reality for many. Food was scarce, and many families had to make do with what little they had. Some people resorted to breadlines and soup kitchens just to get a single meal for the day. Homes were lost, and shanty towns, often humorously referred to as Hoovervilles, after the then president, sprung up across the nation. And then there was the Dust Bowl, an environmental disaster that hit the agricultural heartland of America. Unfavorable weather conditions combined with poor farming practices led to massive dust storms that wiped out crops, further deepening the economic woes. The Great Depression wasn't just an American ordeal. It was a global catastrophe. Its effects rippled across the world from Europe to Asia, leaving no economy untouched. International trade dwindled, currencies plummeted, and a wave of economic protectionism swept across nations, each trying to safeguard their own interests. Yet, amidst all the hardship, there was resilience. Families clung to each other, communities banded together, and individuals found ways to endure. They shared what little they had, bartered when money was scarce, and held on to hope, even when it seemed elusive. The Great Depression was a time of great hardship, but it was also a time of great resilience. It was a period in history that tested the mettle of nations and individuals alike, shaping them for the challenges to come. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced a series of programs and policies known as the New Deal. This was an unprecedented move, a bold response to the economic crisis that had gripped the nation for 4 long years. The New Deal's primary goals were threefold: relief for the unemployed and poor, recovery of the economy, and reform of the financial system to prevent a repeat depression. Relief was immediate, as the government swiftly implemented programs to help those most affected by the Great Depression. The Civilian Conservation Corps and the Works Progress Administration put millions of unemployed Americans back to work, building infrastructure and public works that still stand today. Meanwhile, the government focused on economic recovery. The National Recovery Administration and the Agricultural Adjustment Act aimed to stabilize industrial and agricultural production, boost wages and prices, and stimulate economic growth. The New Deal also sought to reform the financial system. The Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 resulted in the creation of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which protected bank deposits. This aimed to restore public confidence in the banking system and avoid future bank runs. The New Deal was more than just a set of economic policies. It represented a shift in the role of the federal government in American life. For the first time, the government took on the responsibility of ensuring economic stability and the welfare of its citizens. It marked a significant departure from the laissez-faire economic policies of previous administrations. However, the New Deal wasn't without its critics. Some felt it gave too much power to the federal government, while others thought it didn't go far enough to address the economic crisis. Despite these criticisms, the New Deal programs and policies had a profound impact on American society and the economy. The New Deal marked the beginning of a slow but steady recovery. It laid the groundwork for a more active government role in the economy and set the stage for future economic and social reforms. This period in history serves as a reminder of the power of innovative thinking and bold action in times of crisis. Although the Great Depression ended over 8 decades ago, its lessons remain relevant today. The Great Depression, a period of economic hardship unparalleled in the 20th century, left an indelible mark on not only the United States, but the entire world. Its aftermath influenced the economic, social, and political landscapes in ways that are still evident today. From an economic perspective, the Depression underscored the need for a more active role for government in the economy. Prior to the 1930s, laissez-faire economics, or the principle of non-interference, was the norm. However, the economic turmoil of the Depression paved the way for a shift in thought. The government began to take on a more interventionist role, implementing regulations and policies aimed at stabilizing the economy and preventing such a catastrophic event from recurring. In terms of societal impact, the Depression brought about significant changes in the American way of life. It instilled in the people a deep sense of frugality and resourcefulness, traits that were passed down through generations. It also fostered a stronger sense of community, as people united to help one another survive the harsh economic conditions. The Depression also shaped government policy. The New Deal, enacted in response to the crisis, led to the creation of numerous federal agencies and programs that still exist today. These include the Social Security Administration, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, to name a few. These agencies were established with the aim of protecting the rights and welfare of the American people and ensuring the stability of the financial system. Yet perhaps the most important lesson from the Great Depression is the resilience of economies. Despite the severity of the crisis, the economy eventually rebounded. It took time, and it required significant changes in policy and societal attitudes, but it did recover. So the next time you wonder about the resilience of economies, remember the Great Depression, a difficult but defining chapter in global history.